I would like to invite Jolie Bronner, who's the director of the coalition, to do a national land blessing. Jolie?
Thank you so much for that intro, Brenna, and thank you so much for taking some time with me to do our land acknowledgement before we get started. First, for some framing, to recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation. It's a way of honoring the Indigenous people who have been living and working on this land for generations. Land acknowledgements are a traditional custom that dates back centuries in Indigenous communities. Across our nation, there are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. The country we call home was built upon the ancestral lands of Native people. At one time, this entire continent was called home by these strong-willed people who had a deep connection to the natural elements and resources around them. These people did not believe they could own the land because they are part of it. The land owned everyone. So it was easy to steal the land from people who never believed anyone could own the land in the first place. Ultimately, a great land acknowledgement should have your audience actually think instead of checkboxing. A statement is only capable of so much. It is the thoughts, it is the reflections and discussions this can inspire that has real impact. I want to encourage all of you to do your own research or connect with an Indigenous consultant and educator in your community to listen and learn on how best to honor that legacy where you live. As residents of Colorado, we recognize and honor the fact that we stand on the unceded ancestral lands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Lakota, Ute peoples, and many other tribal nations. These lands were also abundant in natural resources, a region of trade, gathering, and considered a sacred place to many Indigenous peoples. This place was their homeland before the impacts of forced removal and colonization. We recognize Native and Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of all of this land and our presence among their descendants who still dwell within it today. We pay our respects to Indigenous elders, past and present, and commit ourselves and our efforts to inclusion and intersectionality in all of our organizing efforts. Thank you. If anyone is interested in connecting with our Indigenous educators through the coalition or learning how you can work with an Indigenous consultant or educator in your own community, please do not hesitate to email me. I would love to help facilitate that connection. Thank you so much for that moment.
Thank you very much, Jolie. Thank you all for experiencing that with us. As Jolie said, we don't read that and do an acknowledgement and blessing to check the box and move on. We read that to honor and to continue to embody values of equity, not just today and in these conversations, but in the work that follows and the months and years ahead. With that, we'd like to jump into our program now. So I will share my screen and just want someone to let me know that you're seeing the right screen there. You see a welcome.
Looks great.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. So who are we? As an organization, we are the Alliance for Collective Action, and we were founded in 2004, and we really are conveners. We're conveners to help drive and uplift systems level change. And through this, we've really been referred to as a connective tissue within the climate movement across Colorado. And from there, our founders, John Powers and Jana Six, are actually both with us today. So John and Jana, if you just give a wave, we want to honor you and your vision and legacy in our founding and in the work that moves forward today. So thank you so much for founding the organization 20 years ago, and thank you for joining us today. Over the last 20 years, the Alliance has built a network of leaders in government, academia, for-profit, nonprofit, civic, community leaders, philanthropists, and we unite and mobilize this network to identify some of the largest problems that we're facing, identify solutions to those problems, and then move thought to action through community-led solutions. That's what we mean by collective action. These are our guiding statements as an organization. I won't read them to you, but suffice it to say that we unite and mobilize the collective power of environmental and social movements to drive systems level change and advance solutions for a thriving planet. We'll share with you exactly more about what we mean by that in the program that follows. We did rebrand recently. So this year, May of this year, we rebranded to become the Alliance for Collective Action. And that's because the issues that we face are so large, so daunting, so existential, that there is not a single person, organization, sector, region, country, or leader that can do this alone. We need to unite together through collective action to advance solutions at the pace and scale needed. And that's what our brand represents. We can't do this alone. Everything we do is with you, our members and our partners. We have two main programs that we do to drive collective action. And the first one is the Alliance Center, and the second one is the Coalition for a Regenerative Future. And we'll go over both of those briefly here, and then we'll do a deeper dive into the coalition. So the center itself was built in 1908. It's a historic building in downtown Denver, and we purchased it and founded it in 2004. Again, John Powers and Jana Six are our co-founders. They're here with us today. And the building's been through many different renovations to produce the gorgeous, high-performance, high-tech building that it is today. And it has 7 LEED certifications, as well as a WELL Health Safety rating. So we have certifications for how we manage the building to minimize environmental impact, while also increasing human health and wellness and the collective action that comes through the building. The center itself supports about 160 other organizations every single year to do their work better and faster and with more collective action than any one of us could have alone. It is a powerhouse of legislative wins in the state and is also really a convening and event place. We host hundreds of events every year through this center that brings together thousands of change agents to connect together, to connect to solutions, and mobilize action through our collective framework. So that's the center. We've been operating that for about 20 years now. The Coalition for a Regenerative Future is really what invites you here today. And this was our newest program that we founded in response to the pandemic in 2020. And when the pandemic hit, we knew that it was coming to disrupt all systems that shape and govern our lives. And although the disruption of the pandemic was chaotic and painful and very traumatic, that disruption was somewhat needed. We needed something to wake the collective up and to help us understand that normal was broken. Normal was very broken for planet, and it was certainly broken for most people. And so our theory was, how do we actually leverage this time of change? What is our obligation to look at long-range sustainability planning during this time of chaos? Being students of history, we also know that the groups, the paradigms, the parties, the initiatives that really take traction coming out of a chaotic moment are the ones that have strategies ready to go. And so when the pandemic hit, we got fast to work building a long-range strategy to build Colorado forward. And to do that, we did crowdsourced listening. So the summer of 2020, we did a 7-part listening series, all virtual, to hear from hundreds of Coloradans, farmers, ranchers, CEOs, the governor, bankers, elected officials came, school teachers came, and we listened deeply about what is happening in your life, how is the pandemic impacting you, and what is the future you want coming out of this, moving forward towards a regenerative future. Through that, we crowdsourced a database of over 1,000 actionable solutions that real Coloradans wanted to see. And through that, formed the Coalition for a Regenerative Future the fall of 2020. Now, over the last 3 years, we've been rapidly prototyping, taking solutions from that database, testing them, seeing what works, learning to fail fast, and elevating only projects that have replicable models and scalable, measurable impact. So I won't share with you all of the stuff that we tested over the last 3 years because we'd be here forever, but I will share that through this framework, we have 4 projects that are replicable and scalable, not just here in Colorado, but across our great nation. And you'll hear about more of those projects in detail here next in the program. This is also the first time in 3 years that we've been actively recruiting members outside of Colorado. So when we formed in 2020, the coalition base has all been Colorado. And starting about 4 weeks ago, we started to accept and work with members outside of Colorado. And we now have about 20 members outside of Colorado from 9 different regions across the country. And we'll share with you where those regions are here at the end of the program. Now, before we get into our projects, I want to talk a little bit about our framework. And there's a word I've used today that many of you might know, or it might be new, or maybe you're unsure about what does regeneration mean? So I wanted to take a moment and just define that, is that regeneration is not synonymous with sustainability, but it's also not better or worse. There are some practitioners that will tell you regeneration is 3 steps ahead of sustainability. But in our perspective, regeneration works in a dance with sustainability because you can sustain anything for a certain amount of time. And if you look at this picture in front of you on the left is sustained degeneration. The systems of exploitation that shape and govern our lives today, we are putting so much effort into sustaining them as a species that signs of collapse are all around us. Call it mass anxiety or depression or economic oppression. Look at the wars, look at biodiversity loss. The list goes on and on and on of signs of systems level collapse. And that's because we're trying to sustain systems that no longer serve. So our theory and the movement we are working to build with all of you is how do we reinvent systems in service to people and planet using regenerative principles? And regeneration means to renew, to restore, to heal, and then sustain systems of regeneration into the future. So I just wanted to pause real quick and define that for the group to help understand more about how we're approaching regeneration in our work. So that's the theory of regeneration and how we define it. The quickest synonym I can give is healing. And the 8 building blocks you see in front of you now were the results of that community listening we did in 2020. So we held many different virtual sessions to hear from hundreds of Coloradans. And after we created a database of 1,000 actionable solutions, we poured over it to see what were the themes, what were the content areas that were present no matter where we were talking or who we were talking to, and came up with these 8 building blocks you see in front of you. Now, it's an imperfect model, right? Regeneration is always in a cycle of improvement and healing, but these are the 8 building blocks that guide and shape our work today and into the future. For us, this is what a regenerative society is made on. And so the projects that you'll hear about next work at the intersectionality of as many of these as possible. So how do we uplift food systems while also looking at clean energy and workforce? So I'll just give you a moment to look at these. I won't read them through for you, but I just want to give you a moment to absorb these because they're very important in the work that comes next. All right. So with that, you can all have access to that if you'd like to see it more later. It is on our website. So with the rapid prototyping, we have identified 4 projects, as I mentioned, that are scalable and replicable, not just in our state, but across our great nation. These are also informed by deep climate science, and community engagement. So we know we need to quit polluting fossil fuel or quit polluting greenhouse gas emissions into the air. And the fastest way to do that is to transition off of fossil fuels as fast as possible. So we're focusing on the renewable energy transition. Even if we did that tomorrow, though, folks, there's still too much carbon in the atmosphere. The other part of that equation is sequestering carbon through natural carbon sinks. And the best way to do that is through the health of our soil, regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture also helps strengthen food systems, looks at economic development, community building, and nutrition. So there's a lot within both of these strategies. The third project is focused on workforce development in service to the other 2. How do we upskill, reskill, next skill the workforce into clean energy and into regenerative agriculture? And then the fourth project puts a nice bow around all of that every year with our policy and advocacy work, where we've taken a really refreshing model at crowdsourced policy that has had an outsized impact in Colorado. So to go deeper on each of these projects and share more about what we're doing, we'll be welcoming in the coalition team to give voice to their own work. So next up is Jane Allen to share with you more about our work in the energy transition. Jane, over to you.
Thanks, Brenna. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you all today. My name is Jane Allen. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director of Climate and Energy Resilience for the Coalition. Our climate and energy program is focused on advocating for a just transition for all fossil fuel workers and frontline communities in Colorado. And before I dive into some of our projects, I think it's helpful to explain what we mean when we say just transition, because there are certainly many definitions out there. We take a holistic approach that considers both the past harms created by the fossil fuel industry on historically underserved communities, and also looks at distributing the benefits of the clean energy economy, so no worker or community is left behind. It's important to note that Colorado has already made incredible strides to set a precedent for this work with the creation of the very first Office of Just Transition in 2019. And this office was created to support coal workers and communities as Colorado closes all of its coal mines and power plants. And while this work is deeply needed, it's our position that it doesn't go far enough. We know that the state of the climate crisis requires us to rapidly transition off of all fossil fuels. And by only supporting coal-impacted communities and not being inclusive of our oil and gas communities, we're really only delaying a full energy transition from taking place and creating a lot of uncertainty about what the future holds. And so with this in mind, last year, we hosted our first ever Just Transition Roundtable series. And the goal of this effort was to start a dialogue on what a just transition could look like for the oil and gas sector and the communities that live in the areas where these activities are located. And so this discussion brought together representatives from labor, environmental justice, and community groups, and led to the Just Transition Policy Recommendations report, which identified potential solutions and paths forward, and were all focused and guided by 4 key pillars that I'm going to quickly go over right now. So the first key pillar is support for workers and their families. The second is justice and opportunities for impacted communities. The third is how do we develop and fund sustainable economic solutions? And the fourth is responsibility to the environment, making sure that we're staying in line with our climate goals, both as a state and a global community. And I want to highlight that recommendations from the roundtable were used to help create House Bill 23-1074, which is a bill that was passed earlier this year, which requires one of our state offices, the Office of Future of Work, to conduct a comprehensive study on Colorado's oil and gas workforce. To continue to build on the discussions that we held in the roundtable, we're currently working with the Colorado Fiscal Institute to do a deep listening tour and a survey project to better understand, again, what are the needs, challenges, and opportunities for workers and communities that are connected to the oil and gas industry to make sure that their voices are heard and considered as Colorado makes really big decisions about its energy future. We also have a Just Transition Advisory Committee where we discuss policy ideas and current efforts to support advancing the energy transition in Colorado. Before I pass it to the next speaker, I want to share that the photos on the left show some of this stakeholdering in action. So the first picture is at an event that we hosted along with some of our coalition partners to speak with community members in Commerce City about what a future could look like beyond the Suncor refinery, which is the only refinery that we have in Colorado, but is a source of great pain and toxic pollution and a lot of hardship for the local community and everyone surrounding it. And so that was a really powerful event that we hosted, that we got to actually talk with community leaders about the ways that, not only the ways that this refinery is impacting them, but also what could the future actually look like. The bottom photo is from a trip we went on to talk with community leaders in Garfield County about transition in the region and solutions to support rural communities on the Western Slope. So that's just a very quick overview of our Just Transition efforts, and I want to make sure that we get to all the speakers on our list today. But if you have any questions or if you're interested in this work, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll make sure to put my email in the chat and would love to hear from anyone that's really called to this work and wants to learn more. And so with that, I will pass it to Jolie to share more about our work in regenerative agriculture.
Thank you so much for that overview of this transformative work, Jane. Really incredible work. I do want to direct everyone to see the chat. Riley has shared the Just Transition Roundtable recommendation report as well that Jane referenced. So by all means, take a deep dive into that. But right now, we're going to shift and start speaking about our regenerative agriculture work. As Brenna said, this work is holistic and intertwined. So we can talk about stopping of the burning of fossil fuels, but there's still too much carbon in our atmosphere. So we are heavily focused on drawing that carbon out of the atmosphere, sequestering carbon at scale through our working lands and through our food systems with our regenerative agriculture work. Now, the reason we tend to support this work and where we focused is after speaking with regenerative ag practitioners and learning from community, transitioning to these regenerative agriculture practices, the greatest barrier is not a lack of want, it's a lack of funding, it's a lack of technical assistance, and it's a lack of community support. And so that's where we come in, is bridging these gaps to ensure that our ag producers and our food systems can sequester carbon, serve us with healthy, nutritious food, and make a better food system for everyone involved in Colorado. Currently, we work with the state and community partners to implement this as the conveners that we are. We've worked very closely with our partners at Zero Foodprint to help elevate their model and working with the Colorado Department of Agriculture to help facilitate that connection. You'll hear more about this transformative work from Anthony when he speaks later in this convening. We've also continued that work with the Colorado Department of Agriculture, looking at their current funding systems and really starting to support how money is coming out of their state soil health program. Through us, we've worked with the Colorado Department of Agriculture to create a cohort of historically marginalized urban and suburban ag producers. This way, there's a community for folks to connect with and learn from as they access these funds. One of the biggest barriers is the first line on that application asking, how many acres of land do you own? That's a challenge for a lot of our ag producers. And we've been working with the Department of Agriculture to see how we improve this process and remove some of those barriers for our smaller producers. Additionally, we want to connect people, though, to these producers and the food they eat. So it's not just about connecting producers to funding, it's about connecting people to the food they eat. We do this through our farm tours. We believe this is the best way to bridge the urban-rural divide in Colorado because we are connecting people through food. We all connect through food. We just this past season hosted 2 different farm tours focusing on different target audiences. One, chefs and restaurateurs, making sure we are connecting all of our food artists on both ends of that spectrum so people can source more locally and also restaurants can more easily help and support our local food system through some of those hurdles that they have in supplying to restaurants. And then we also connected our community to Regen Ag producers and the local food system, elevating our food systems in Colorado. And we plan to do this work even bigger as we look forward to expanding our audience, including legislators next year, larger procurement managers, and more of the community as we connect them to where their food comes from. And you heard legislators, that's right. We tie a neat bow around all of this work with our support for legislative, there we are, thank you, Riley, with our support for legislative farm tours, but also crowdsourced policy. We do a ton of that work in our ag community, elevating the voices of our agricultural workers. And that's a big goal next year as we head into the policy season. As I wrap up our Regen Ag work, we're going to move on to workforce with Ryan, because you can't talk about the new energy economy and we can't talk about active working lands without who's doing the work in both of those spaces. So thank you so much. I will drop my email in the chat if you have any questions about regenerative agriculture, but let's hear from our workforce development manager, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Julie. Nice to meet you all. I'm Ryan Campbell. I am the workforce development project manager. My pronouns are he and him. And I'm a white male with a beard and medium to long length hair wearing a white shirt. So the way we're approaching the workforce development work we want to do are in 4 buckets: career awareness, pipeline alignment, supportive services, and technical and policy. So career awareness, this is work associated with the front of the talent pipeline, sharing information about green career pathways, skills, competencies required for entry-level positions, career maps, where you can go to get trained for these roles, and more. And it's really critical that we highlight these various different roles within the green sector to get students and workers interested and inform them how to access these opportunities. Now, with pipeline alignment, the pipeline refers to the local throughput of workers to specific training partners and employers. Aligning refers to connecting specific partners within the green sector, training partners, as well as with the employers that will hire their graduates, with community colleges, and with feeder groups of the talent pools themselves, such as Denver Public Schools, school districts, community-based organizations. So we want to help connect and make that more efficient so that leaders within those groups can form strong relationships, and we can be more efficient in directing workers to get the training to then get hired by these green leaders. Now, for supportive services, these services are specific services provided to workers, usually not included by employer benefits. Examples of these are case management, mental health care and counseling, transportation, childcare, access to legal services and clinics, and more. These are usually direct services within with the populations facing barriers to employment or success, such as people experiencing homelessness, new Americans, immigrants, single parents, people with disabilities, etc. Now, while the Coalition for a Regenerative Future is not traditionally a direct service agency, I think we have an opportunity to augment gaps within the talent pipeline and support workers from these communities gain success entering the new energy economy. And the last bucket is technical and policy. The coalition represents its roots growing from the alliance, and as such, will aim to maintain the tenets of rapidly prototyping new technology and elevating policy from our stakeholders. So that could look like piloting technical projects, as well as gathering policy recommendations and elevating those to our legislators. So some of the work that we've been doing this year is a lot of stakeholdering. We've been meeting, this photo is from meeting down in Pueblo with some unions and some other stakeholders to understand the workforce system down there and where we can help elevate green career pathways. We've also launched a green career presentation program aimed at going into schools to educate students about career pathways in the new energy economy, as well as taking that same presentation and going into community organizations to highlight those same career pathways where you can get trained, the salary expectations for different levels, and more. We're also looking to launch an employee resource group for the solar sector to support existing workers within the solar field to help improve retention and support some of those communities that we highlighted that are experiencing barriers, so that we can make a more robust sector that supports all energy workers in this area. And then we've been doing a lot of building those relationships, matchmaking employers with community partners, or those training organizations with employers and community partners. We've also been looking at some different spaces, including geothermal, and seeing if we can go in there and help inject equity into the workforce development to make sure that all Coloradans have access to this emerging market. And it's not just the traditional laborers that we're hiring. So that's a brief overview of what we've done so far. But where we are going is we are going to continue to be improving the talent pipeline. We're going to be piloting new programs to support workers coming into these careers and highlighting them, and as well as exploring new ways through legislative or technical projects to support this sector. So with that, I'll hand it back to Jolie.
Oh, good. We're back to me. So I will tie the neat bow around this with our policy work, everyone. As we said, you've heard a lot about deep community listening as we talked about all of the projects. And a lot of times the goal of this deep community listening is elevating our grassroots ideas to our grass tips leaders. And that's what we do with our policy work. It is an exciting thing to be a part of, and we are always very, very excited to share it with all of you. What we do each session is we go out into community. We open up to community to allow coalition members to tell us their bold, transformative policy ideas. We create an online forum for this, but that's not enough. We also go out into community because we're looking for the unusual suspects when it comes to policy. People know what doesn't serve them. And so we speak with them, we listen, and we learn how we can help craft real policy that serves community. Each year we elevate hundreds of ideas to our legislators. And what we do is we share this collaborative community voice and this work with all of our elected officials, regardless of which side of the aisle they sit on, because this is about elevating community voice and civic engagement beyond politics. In the last 3 legislative sessions, our policy platforms have been influential in 66 bills in the state of Colorado and have helped direct nearly $1 billion worth of funding towards regenerative projects. We're doing it all again this year too, and we are going even further. We are doing deep community listening in our subject matter areas. We are stakeholdering in our working groups. We are talking to community organizations, and we are working with different members in our community to hear what they're supporting, what they're interested in, and how we can collaboratively work towards a regenerative future for all of us in the 2024 legislative session. So if you know someone in community who has a bold idea or wants to talk to me about policy, don't hesitate to email. I would love to hear more about your amazing idea. But as we talk policy and looking forward into 2024, I think it's a great time to start talking about our plans for growth and expansion. But I think we should kick it back to Brenna to hear more about that. Brenna?
Thank you, Jolie. Thank you, Jane and Ryan. Wonderful to hear all of your work. We'll have time for some question and answer here in just a little bit. I know we've been sharing a lot of information with you. So one more section before we take a little break for questions. So as you heard, this is our inaugural launch event for national expansion, and we're so happy that you are all here. So what does that actually mean, really? So we wanted to share with you our big kind of 5-step strategy for national scale. And then the next slide is even more granular. What does the next 6 months look like for the membership journey? So first and foremost, you heard me mention at the beginning of our program about the network the Alliance has built across government, academia, for-profit, nonprofit, philanthropy, media, community leaders, and civic leaders. And we know that a lot of the impact that we've been able to have as an alliance for collective action is because of the network that we align with and the network that we help mobilize and convene. And so we know that if we're going to have any type of impact at the national stage, we have to also have a national network. And so that's what we've been behind the scenes building for the last 2.5 years, as soon as we started getting pulled national. And this is the first time we're starting to formalize that national network by recruiting and working with members in the coalition outside of Colorado. So thank you all so much for being a part of this. The second step that you see there is really creating a platform and an ecosystem where we can all share and cross-pollinate our solutions, because we know, you'll hear from 4 national members in just a moment here, but we know that our model is not the only one out there that should be replicated and scaled. There are so many amazing models out there that we want to help find these pockets of hope, elevate them, give a megaphone to them, help create replicable models and strategies to then really move collective action. Because again, we can't do this alone. And there is so much good work out there that we're hoping to elevate. You can almost relate it to importing and exporting best practices. So helping elevate what we test here up and out across the country, and looking what else is working across the country and helping those models spread. Step 3 is really going into consulting. So Jane, Ryan, Jolie, all the projects that you just heard, if you're interested in bringing that work to your home state, or interested in working with us on any of the 4 projects we just shared, we would love to work with you on that. That's something that we can be a thought partner, lend guidance and expertise, lend our network and the models that we have. And we are actually building replication toolkits for each of those 4 projects that will be starting to be distributed into this year through next year. And then for us, everything we do is pilot to scale. How do we test something, work on it, figure out what works, double down on that, and sunset the rest? And so for us, I would say steps between 1 through 3 are really in a pilot model for national growth. Once we start getting into steps 4 and 5, we are beyond pilot and into scale. And 4 would really be doing place-based replication projects outside of Colorado. So working with any of you to replicate the projects that we have in your home area, or vice versa, bringing your projects here and actually implementing them, not just sharing them, but implementing those projects. And then step 5 would be the biggest lift, biggest impact. If the conditions are right, the funding is right, the partners are right, we could do state-based replication of state-based coalitions connected through this national ecosystem. So in Colorado, we have about 400 members that work with us on a regular basis to create the projects that you just heard. And if we wanted to do that and we were invited into place, we could look at coalition replication in other states as well, where we have full-blown coalitions coordinated through collective action. So these are 5 steps, kind of broad strategies, and they are complementary. They are not necessarily in sequence, meaning one has to happen before the next. Some of them can be simultaneous, but they do have a lot of feedback loops and iteration loops for us to pilot, again, see what's working, double down on that, and sunset the rest. So these are the broad strategies. then what does the next 6 months look like from a membership roadmap? So today you're at the inaugural launch event, October 12th. That's where we are in that roadmap. Starting next month and into the rest of this year, we'll be releasing our replication toolkits. So we'll have one coming out in November around farm tours. After that, will be one coming out on crowdsourced policy. And so these are step-by-step replication guides that are only for coalition members for how you replicate this work. And we are here to help every step along the way. Then in Q1 of next year, we'll start our quarterly programming. So we'll be hosting virtual events every quarter to share what's going on, what we're learning, and elevate the work of our members. So you'll hear from 4 today. Every quarterly convening will be elevating the work of more national members to really be a movement megaphone. We'll also be doing webinars and newsletters, case studies to elevate the members' work. And then in spring of next year, our goal is to launch an engagement platform where members, you all, can interact with each other. Yes, interact with us, but also interact with each other without us as a really organic way to grow the movement and share what's working, what you're learning, or what you're struggling with even in your home region. So there's a lot more coming after this spring, but we just wanted to give you the overall strategy and then a quick snapshot of what the next 6 months look like. So with that, we can open it up for a few questions if there's any questions on stuff we've shared so far before we transition to the next section of the program. No questions. As Jolie says, that must mean we explained it perfectly then. Well, feel free to drop questions in the chat. If you have any other questions, we can always circle back later. So the next thing we wanted to do is actually go into a quick word cloud before we bring up our national speakers. So Riley, I'm going to ask you to drop that in. I was not able to see it while I was screen sharing. So there is a link there in the chat if you all can go to that and enter in whatever words are coming to you. You can enter in as many as you want about what inspires you most so far about what you've heard with this work. Beautiful. So you can see all of those come in. Don't be shy. You can put as many in as you want. We really are hoping to capture the collective brain here about what is attracting you to this work. So collaboration remains to be a big one. Beautiful. And yeah, if you can't access the word cloud, you can put it in the chat there and we can add it for you all. Trying to capture the ones in the chat. All right. Well, thank you all for going through that. We really wanted to hear from you. You know, what is inspiring you with this work? So with that, a heads up to our national speakers. We're about to go to you next. And to do that, I just wanted to show you the slide about who our speakers are and have Jolie introduce them. And then we'll go ahead and go into our speaker panel. So the 4 speakers that you're about to hear from are some of our first national members as we were recruiting. And some of these members we've been working with for a while. Some of them are newer to us. And so Jolie will be moderating this section, and you'll really be hearing kind of what are their work, what are their replicable models that we really think are these pockets of hope around the nation that we want to help give a megaphone to. And then what does this collaboration look like within the coalition? So with that, I'll pass it over to Jolie, Jacques-Philippe, Anthony, Jen, and John. Jolie, stage is yours.
Thank you so much for that lovely intro, Brenna. I just love that one of the biggest words we saw on that word cloud was collaboration. And I think that that really speaks to how we do our work. You'll notice as you join the Coalition for More Things, we like to share our stage. It is about collective action. It is about elevating the work of partners, and it's about sharing any stage that we get, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to start by hearing from Anthony Mint, co-founder and executive director of Zero Foodprint. Anthony is a chef turned climate crusader and co-founder of Zero Foodprint, a nonprofit leading collaboration to scale regenerative agriculture. And since 2020, Zero Foodprint has awarded over $1.7 million to 96 regenerative agriculture projects. These efforts are expected to sequester as much carbon as not burning over 6 million gallons of gas. With that, Anthony, I would love to hear more about your work. So tell us more about your work and why you joined the coalition.
Thanks, Jolie. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to try to do this quickly to save time for everybody in conversation, but essentially the work we do is so aligned with the vision of the Alliance for Collective Action, because I think we are basically trying to mobilize collective action to regenerate acres. And so the first note is just that regenerative agriculture is a major opportunity. And so in the past, 5 or 10 years, a lot of science, biogeochemistry, agroecology has been coming out, basically confirming how immense of an opportunity regenerative ag is. But of course, changing millions of acres would always start with changing 1 acre. And so I think we really have been focusing on getting that next practice onto the next acre. And so there's a little bit of kind of like prevailing confusion and murkiness sometimes around regenerative ag. How does it compare to organic? What does it mean? What are the principles? And a lot of that has to do with essentially like the consumption side, the ingredient. And I think we've kind of starting in 2019 in collaboration with the state of California, and then eventually 2021 and 22 in Colorado, have started to focus more on the production side. So building up the supply by essentially just getting as many practices on as many acres as possible. So our work historically, legacy work, has sort of been this crowdfunding effort among leading businesses ranging from Michelin-starred chefs to spirits to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, which is these T-Rexes here, to consumer packaged goods and wine and compost companies, all the way down to Subway sandwiches. And so our member businesses are sending 1% of revenue to directly regenerate acres. It's starting to add up. So we collect the funds and then we get 95% of it out to farms and ranches, again, just to get the next practice on the next acre. You can see it in practice, like, at a cool restaurant in Union Station in Denver, the price has gone up slightly. To my knowledge, consumers are generally sort of like excited that someone's doing something. And then over here, you can see on Subway, basically just a couple cents added. These fees are optional at Subway and at most of our member businesses. And, I liken it to the fees that are sort of prevalent in other industries like recycling, a couple cents per can of beer at the supermarket to enable recycling in a region. At this point, kind of just viewing healthy soil as kind of a similar societal kind of public benefit that's necessary. And then it's the very early days, but you can start to see that individual cities and counties are starting to create programs like this. So this is the snapshot from the Climate Action Plan in Sonoma County, where they are exploring ordinances to create a sequester local program to build up the economic capacity for carbon sequestration. And over here, you can see potential implementation partners, Zero Foodprint, Recology's the trash company, so sort of like thinking about systems change, a lot of people have started to become familiar with programs like $1 per month on the energy bill that can go to improve the grid of energy. And so I think we're proposing, why don't we get 1% at restaurants, $1 on every trash bill going to essentially improve the grid of food. And so I can say a lot more. I'm going to pause there on our work.
Great start, Anthony. This is looking really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing kind of that start to your journey with us. So you did join the coalition in the early days, as you mentioned earlier on. Can you tell us more about what it's like to work with the Alliance and how this partnership has really helped to scale your work, including the national USDA project that we're ramping up?
Yeah, sorry. Lost track and wasn't sure if I was going like directly next. So this is a slide that kind of outlines that trajectory in the past couple of years. And so I had no expectations when I kind of went to my first meeting, kind of just started to meet some of the local leaders in Colorado as we were starting our collaboration with Boulder County. And then, much to my surprise, like Brenna and the team immediately sort of just like latched on to the work we were doing as like, this is a great example of collective action to create transformative change. Let's work on this. Next thing you know, there started to be introductions with, business leaders, officials in the city of Denver. We expanded the collaboration from Boulder to also include Denver, then eventually the Colorado Department of Ag. And then as those talks continued, Zero Footprint and the Alliance were able to basically begin a statewide public-private collaboration. And so the long-term goal of that is to create $5 million a year of private sector funding. And then in addition to sort of like that kind of public-private work, the Alliance also made incredible connections with institutions like the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And so in addition to that being the first institution that became a Zero Footprint member, we were also able to work together on a great event at the museum that even included an appearance and endorsement and remarks from Governor Jared Polis. And so, that was all essentially made possible through the network and the amazing execution and, earned credibility of the Alliance. And then the year after, we began a USDA application effort in conjunction with a bunch of other groups across the country, led by Open Team at Wolf's Neck Center for Agriculture and the Environment in Maine, and were successful. And so Open Team and Wolf's Neck secured a grant for $35 million, of which $7 million will be overseen by Zero Footprint in terms of deployment to farms and ranches nationwide, with a goal of matching funds from those businesses. And so, literally paving the way for our expansion nationwide and the expansion of sort of collective action models for transformative change. And then just a quick plug on like, that concept. Here's a bunch of other collective action programs in other regions, and industries. I won't read them all, but basically like renewable energy, $1 for tire disposal, this and that. And so I think, in my opinion, at least, collective action is really where the most exciting work is taking place, and that it's not all, farm bill and federal subsidies. Transformative change can happen at the local and state level, and is happening. So thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Anthony. It was a really, really great story of how through collective action, we've created more connection and really improved a lot of the systems here in the state of Colorado. And that wouldn't have been possible without all of that combined thought and expertise in the room. So thank you for being such an incredible partner over the years. And we just love sharing your work. I think we're going to do even more as we head into 2024 and look nationally to expand that work. But as we move on and continue to talk about our collaboration, next, I'm going to invite Jacques-Philippe Pivaget to join us. He is the founder and managing partner of Good Light Capital. Good Light confronts the two parallel crises: the systemic underinvestment in entrepreneurs who represent the vast majority of the population, people of color, women, our LGBTQ friends, and the fact that technology is being insufficiently leveraged towards the existential questions of our time. Good Light Capital invests in underrepresented founders using technology to address climate, health, education, financial inclusion, and the future of work. But I'm going to let Jacques-Philippe let you guys know. Sorry, just stumbled over your name there. Jacques-Philippe is going to join us now and share more about this transformative work. So will you please tell us more about your work and why you joined the coalition?
Thank you, Jolie. Appreciate you sharing more about the work that we do. I thought you did a splendid job and I appreciate it. And it was also wonderful hearing more about Zero Footprint and the work that you're doing, Anthony. It's super important, regenerative agriculture and really looking at that part of our overall system and the ecosystem in a more robust manner. And I appreciate it. As you mentioned, Jolie, on my end, and I'm based here in New York City, I've been involved in the investment space for more than 2 decades at this point. And, as you mentioned, traditionally, the model is not very open. It's not very collaborative. And it's not inclusive of all the resources that we could bring to bear to solve for significant challenges. And historically, it doesn't even necessarily look to solve for significant challenges, right? Historically, business has been very much focused on the bottom line and maximizing shareholder value. And at Goodlight, we see a connection between shareholder value and human value. And the idea that there's actual correlation between supporting underrepresented founders, as you mentioned, it's about 70% of the population, women, Black, Hispanic, LGBTQ, all these groups, which represent about 70% of the population, collectively have gotten less than 2% of the capital. And so if we think of the challenges that are imminent, that we really have to focus on in the near term, you mentioned some of them: climate and sustainability, health and wellness, education, future of employment, financial inclusion. It's really important that we fall back on that word that everyone discussed earlier, collaboration, and our full collective brain, if you will. If you think of all humans as one big brain, up to this point, we've only used about 30% of that brain to develop solutions. And clearly, it hasn't gotten us to where we want to be. So at Goodlight, in leveraging my expertise and our team's expertise and seeing what's worked and what hasn't, we said, number one, we have to really find a way to be far more inclusive in terms of finding new ideas and new solutions for these massive challenges that are really important for us to solve for us. That was part one. Secondly, you touched upon as well in terms of using that tech to enable progress. So as venture funds, we've always focused on finding the next tech, except we've used it primarily for various businesses that aren't necessarily aligned with our existential challenges. So for us, we said, let's use it for actual challenges that are incredibly important to us, but also internally in our business. So we developed what we call the Bright Portal, which allows us to leverage that collective expertise so that we can source deals, evaluate them, support the portfolio companies and the founders all the way to exit, as well as source capital to move the entire process along. And when you do all those things, you develop a model that's far more sustainable and scalable without giving up on performance. So as of the last couple of years, we started to test these assumptions through actual investments in a dozen companies, everything from AI and IoT to prevent wildfires, to social health indicators to decrease the incidence of breast cancer in women, to drone technology to repair utility wire lines, or digitizing the process for expunging records in the criminal justice system, which affects 70 to 100 million Americans, and so forth and so on. And all these companies that I've mentioned, even in the last couple of years, that have been incredibly challenging, right? Interest rates are skyrocketing, crypto is tanking. But what we found is that when you're solving for things that are actually important, resources still need to move in that direction, right? Unfortunately, wildfires don't correlate with crypto, they're going up, right? So we invested a couple of years ago, they've raised tens of millions since then, have been growing super fast. And that's been the case with a lot of the types of companies we back. And the model's starting to prove that we're really onto something, and we're super excited about it. I know you asked, why did I join the coalition? So I feel like that commercial from back in the day, I think it was a hair product. I'm not only a user, I'm also the CEO. So I'm not the CEO, but I'm a board member. I'm the vice chair of the board. And I was actually the first member of the coalition. And that just speaks to the fact that I think the work that's being done at the center is so important. And I couldn't think of a better way of using my time, our time, if we're looking to solve for some of these, right? So what I described, I think it's amazing, and we're making great progress. But in as far as we can align with other individuals who are also doing the work, we can amplify and catalyze and grow a lot quicker. And that leads us to, wanting to participate as fulsomely as possible. And I highly encourage others to do the same. Let's go for it. This is an incredibly important movement, right? So I'm running a business, and we're definitely bottom line oriented, but it doesn't conflict with the importance of the work that we're doing, and we need all hands on deck to ensure that we reach the objectives that we're striving for. And I'm just happy to be here, and thank you again.
Thank you so much for that, Jacques-Philippe. I had a follow-up question that you ran right through and answered amazingly. And so I'll just elevate those pieces from what you were sharing with us, because your work really parallels that idea of identifying those gaps and elevating and how we bridge them. And I think that's so important when we talk about real solutions for a future that actually serves people. I love hearing about the philosophy behind your work with that, and really your journey. You started as a partner, and now you've even joined the board, as you were saying. I mean, what do you really think is so powerful about this model? As you kind of mentioned the collective action, but any other thoughts on why would a successful international kind of venture capitalist be helping scale this movement?
Well, I think that, our time and our resources are limited. And, speaking for myself, I can only do so much. Right. And so, in as far as I find others who are doing critically important work that I'd love to be doing, but I know I don't have the bandwidth to be doing, and I'm able to support them at least indirectly through this coalition, that's exciting to me. So that's part one. Part two, especially in our case, collective action is a core part of what we do at Good Light Capital, right? So right now we have 1,300 people in the Good Light community, and we're growing it quite rapidly. And the more people who are involved, the more they benefit and the more we benefit as well. And so the commonalities are so clear that it just made total sense to participate through and through and lean in.
Well, thank you so much for, one, being so passionate about what you do, but also bringing that to the coalition, joining and helping to elevate our work, because that's the role of all of us as we join, isn't it? Through collective action. So thank you so much for sharing that and sharing your passion for the work and why you made that decision. It really helps elevate for all of us. As we move to our next speaker, we're going to have John Lanier joining us. He's the executive director of the Ray C. Anderson Foundation. And as I said, that's a Georgia-based foundation working to create a more sustainable world. The Ray C. Anderson Foundation is a founding member of Drawdown Georgia, a statewide initiative working to catalyze a Georgia beyond carbon. And its roadmap lays out a vision for scaling a Georgia-specific climate solution in ways that prioritize equity and public health, creates jobs, and nurtures the natural environment. But I'll let John tell you some more about that. So John, can you please tell us more about your work and why you joined the coalition?
Well, we joined the coalition because collective action is the theory of change of Drawdown Georgia. It was a perfect fit, and I'm grateful, Jolie, that we have a chance to share this work with everyone. But since I'm in Atlanta, not in Colorado, I also want to acknowledge the Muskogee Creek people who lived, worked, produced knowledge on and nurtured the land where Atlanta, Georgia is located, where I am. And it was in 1821 that Georgians began forcing the Muskogee people to relinquish this land. So I recognize the sustained oppression, land dispossession, and involuntary removals of the Muskogee peoples from Georgia and the Southeast. Drawdown Georgia was an idea born out of the inspiration of Project Drawdown. Some of you all may be familiar with Project Drawdown's work that culminated in a New York Times bestselling book in 2017, showing what the world's best climate solutions are. We were inspired by that work, but we also found ourselves thinking as a Georgia-based foundation that the list of solutions they offered us weren't terribly helpful in deciding what we should be prioritizing where we are. We know what climate solutions work best for the world, but which ones work best for Georgia? And so we funded at the Ray C. Anderson Foundation research that universities in Georgia conducted. It was Georgia Tech, the University of Georgia, Emory University, and Georgia State. And 3 years ago, they released a list of 20 high-impact climate solutions, each of which has the ability to be highly successful in the state of Georgia. These solutions span sectors from electricity to transportation, food and agriculture, land sinks, and buildings and materials. And each of these different 20 solutions were also considered in light of the considerations of equity, of how climate solutions can benefit human health, which climate solutions have the greatest job potential, and which climate solutions do the most to protect our natural environment. All told, these climate solutions add up to significant potential reduction in Georgia's carbon footprint. Using a 2005 baseline level, Georgia had 156 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That was the footprint on the baseline year of 2005. It's been coming down, but it can really accelerate this decade. And if we scale each of the climate solutions identified by this research team, this decade we can drive that carbon footprint down to 67 megatons. That would be a 57% reduction in Georgia's carbon footprint by the year 2030. That sets the table to achieve carbon neutrality in accordance with the Climate Accord. But the new thing that we knew about Drawdown Georgia is it could not just be a research project. So often, research fails to become actionable, to get outside of academia. That's not a criticism of our academic partners, but it shows the importance of collective action. And so our foundation put in the work to begin building a movement to make sure that the research identified by our academic partners is something that businesses picked up, that congregations picked up, that the nonprofit community picked up, that the governmental community picked up within our state. And so in many respects, I feel like Drawdown Georgia is really about building a movement in favor of the climate solutions that we know work best in our state.
Wow, John, that's amazing. And the Drawdown Georgia model is just so impressive. How can we, in our collective action, help you scale your work? And what are your hopes for working with the coalition in the months and years ahead?
Yeah, I feel like we've got Georgia. And so if anybody's in Georgia, come and join us. But if Georgia achieves carbon neutrality and other places don't, what's it worth? So when I think about the benefit of tapping into this network, it's the opportunity to replicate what is working. I would love to see there be other drawdown states out there. There aren't yet. Drawdown Georgia is the first of this kind. But even if the appetite for trying to create an entire statewide movement for climate solutions, if that's too big, well, there are pieces of what we've been working on within Drawdown Georgia that are replicable. We've, in fact, done piloted work with Zero Food Print. So I can vouch firsthand for how tremendous of an organization they are and how what they're doing can work in Georgia and elsewhere. We have on the Drawdown Georgia website a really key and foundational tool, an emissions tracker. Many states don't even know what their greenhouse gas emissions are with much rigor. And so Georgia Tech's researchers created a tool that can track what Georgia's carbon footprint is on a month-to-month basis, so we can see our progress over time. We've pulled together businesses and they're doing coordinated action through something called the Drawdown Georgia Business Compact. So if folks want to learn more about how do you catalyze corporations to work together on climate solutions, we're working on that. We have really good ideas around what to do to start and maybe what not to do. There's more. There's just pieces to this Drawdown Georgia ecosystem that we're trying to nourish that we know will thrive elsewhere. When seeing Brenna speak and seeing the list of foundational pillars, I saw the word biomimicry. I like to think that we're trying to be biomimetic here in Georgia as well. When I say ecosystem, I say that very intentionally because we know that there are many species that can thrive in one place, but they can thrive in other places as well. That's what I hope for this network, is that we find opportunities to see what works replicated.
And that fits beautifully with our model, John. We want to see the same thing. We want pilot solutions that are community-based, that we can replicate and scale. And that's what we look for in our partners. And we are so excited to be working with you and Drawdown Georgia as we share it to the network and we continue to elevate that work. I will note again, make sure you're checking out the chat because there are really great links there that can connect you to each of our speakers as we move on to our newest coalition partner, last but not least by any means, Jennifer Luck, who I believe is also joining us From the farthest distance, Jennifer Luck is the Chief Executive Officer of Common Ground. Common Ground is a regenerative hospitality and lifestyle company located in Kauai. Committed to driving lasting impact, Jennifer brings more than 20 years of experience in community initiatives, program management, stakeholder negotiation, and land management to Common Ground. The Common Ground campus itself features a regenerative agroforest, hosts private events, and in mid-2025 will be home to a 140-seat island at table restaurant, which sounds amazing, Jennifer, and I'd love to hear more about that. But as I kick it over to you, will you tell us some more about your work and why you chose to join the coalition?
Sure, Jolie. Oh, although you did such a good job, I feel like, oh, whew, I'm done. You nailed it. You did great. Well, aloha, everybody. I have to be truthful. I'm currently in Los Angeles. I'm here for work, so I'm not joining from Kauai, although I'm heading back on Saturday. But my name is Jennifer. You'll see a picture behind me on my screen. I wanted to give everybody at least a little bit of a sense of Common Ground. I'm the CEO of CG Management, the management company that operates Common Ground. We have about 63 acres on the North Shore of Kauai. And maybe actually before I launch into kind of what we do and the why behind what we do, I'd like to start maybe just by giving a little bit of a background in the history of place. So part of what we do that's really, really important is that we're place-based. We start with where we are and the history of where we are, and that has helped to inform how we do business, the why behind the how that we do business, the values of the company and everything else. So I'd love to start with that, if that's okay, and then I'll jump into kind of the work that we do, and also some of the stuff that we're super excited to collaborate with you guys on, which is coming up quick in November. So a little bit of background, we're on the North Shore of Kauai. Our property has a long agricultural history. For those of you that are not that familiar with Hawaii pre-contact, Hawaii was actually completely self-sustaining. So the entire state had a population of almost 1 million people. That population was able to sustain itself completely and entirely, mainly because of their system of natural resource management. So similar to a watershed, something called an ahupua'a. Which is mountain, Mauka to Makai level management. So you consider the entire system, the wholeness of the system when you're thinking about what food to grow, how much water to use, how to share your catch, all of that. And through those values and that approach, Hawaii was able to feed itself. Then Western contact happened, and many years later, there was something called the Great Mahele. During the Great Mahele, which was at the end of the 19th century, about 1848, missionaries came in and essentially took land from the native Hawaiians. And they did that through kind of a pseudo-legal process. And so because of that displacement, you then had large swaths of land owned by large missionary families. And those families began to monocrop. And that's where you began to see the rise of things like sugarcane and pineapple, and Hawaii's economy began to transition to entirely agricultural based, however, not diversified ag, not regenerative ag that so many of us are really passionate about, but instead monocropping, which was highly extractive from a natural resource point of view. And labor was imported from countries all over the world, from the Philippines, from Portugal, from China, from Japan, and that labor force then sustained that economic model. Once globalization happened, that economic model went by the wayside, and tourism came in and filled that gap and that hole. And so Hawaii's economy began to transition out of agriculture and into an economy that was wholly reliant on tourism and hospitality. Again, a highly extractive model. The old model of hospitality and tourism is highly extractive. It's outside money coming in, taking up natural resources, pulling money from the state, paying not great wages. And then the local economy, the local community is not benefiting that much. So that model is really what we wanted to look at when our company purchased the property at the end of 2018. We wanted to look at a couple of things. We wanted to achieve a couple of things. One, we wanted to use the property how it was meant to be used. So we're an agricultural property. Our entitlements are agricultural. We will eventually be the home of several home sites, but for now we're focusing on the farm and ag. So we wanted to showcase what agriculture that wasn't extractive, what an agricultural model that was additive to the local community might look like. So we began by planting a regenerative agroforest on our property. And then we also knew that we wanted to look at hospitality. We wanted to look at how could you create a model of hospitality that instead of being extractive and putting up walls and separating people from what we felt like was a really incredible, authentic experience in Hawaii and learning about the place, how could you instead look at hospitality through a lens of connection? So when people come onto our campus, we hope to connect them with several things. We want to connect them to the place through the land and the way that we manage the land, the history of the land. We want to connect them to the food that they eat, to showcase ideologies and approaches to growing food that are not extractive, but that are additive, that require no external input. So how do we do that? We do that through our regenerative farm. We want to connect them to each other. And so we do that by sharing food together. Right now, we have farm tours that we run on our property. Those farm tours begin with a tour of our regenerative agroforest and end with a shared meal that's 100% locally sourced. The oil, the salt, all of it comes from either our farm or local or other surrounding local farms. So we want to connect people to place, to the food that they eat, to each other, and to the culture that they're surrounded by. And so that means integrating both Hawaiian culture and arts by local artists into our campus as well, and into the way that we structure our events, the way that we approach events. And we hope that through this lens of connection, by emphasizing connection to place in all these myriad ways, that we can achieve a couple of outcomes that ultimately build a more regenerative system. And what we hope, although it's audacious, I will fully admit, a more regenerative model of hospitality. We are reconceptualizing hospitality. And so for us, that means also feeding into the local economy. Everything that we buy is local. We launched a foundation called the CG Foundation, whose flagship program is the CG Incubator, whereby we provide business training, 15-week business training course for food and beverage entrepreneurs. And then we award those entrepreneurs a $10,000 non-dilutive grant at the end of it. And so through our operations, the way that we put our values forward as a company, also through our private foundation, we are hoping to be additive to the local community, to create a regenerative system where instead of extractive, we're additive. We're feeding the local community, and they're in turn quite literally feeding us. And so everything we do is kind of through that lens. How can we be additive instead of extractive? Our method of agriculture requires no external inputs. We don't use fertilizer or anything. It's a fully self-contained system. Our restaurant, which Jolie talked about, is going to break ground this spring. It's going to be a 140-seat island to table restaurant. Everything that will be served at that restaurant will be 100% locally sourced. So the oil, the salt, all of it, it will tell a story of Hawaii food traditions, and inherent in those food traditions, Hawaii culture. And then we'll be eventually in the next couple of years, 3 to 5 years down the road, we'll be home also to value add processing, and then home sites down the line after that. And so we're really hoping to almost create this kind of micro community within a community that's integrated with Hawaii and with the island of Kauai. And so for now, we do a couple things. We're focused on events, we're focused on farm tours, we're focused on prepping to build our island to table restaurant. And most immediately, that's top of my mind right now is we're focused on our second annual In Community with Food Summit. So we launched this last year. And in my mind, this is really the greatest example of common ground and the way that we think about things, the way that we approach things. In Community with Food is a 3-day summit held on our campus. And where we bring people like JP, who's going to be there and was there year one. We're so stoked that you're coming back, and Brenna and her team that will be coming out, and it'll be 3 days. That'll be a combination of conversations, very deep conversations around how do we build food systems that are more regenerative? How do we look at those food systems? Who are the stakeholders of those food systems? And then connecting all these people, both from Hawaii and outside of Hawaii, internationally, people coming from Costa Rica, Southeast Asia, Europe, all over the world. How do we connect to these people together to help accelerate the ideas that they're working on currently? And maybe how do we give birth to new ideas? And what better way to do that than to actually share food together around a table together? So the food part of In Community with Food is actually really, really important. We have these incredible dinners each night where everyone sits together and we talk and share amazing meals that are locally sourced and wine, and it's really, really lovely. And so In Community with Food, in my mind, is kind of a micro example of, Brenna, what you all are doing on a much, much bigger scale, right? Essentially, it's all about connection. It's all about bringing people together that are doing incredible work or have an intention to do good work. And how do you create those connections and those pathways to accelerate what it is that is already happening, or maybe even to give birth to new ideas? And so I think that's why we're so proud to be part of the National Coalition and so proud to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much for sharing about your work, Jennifer. And it's so wonderful. The work you're doing in Hawaii is really an inspiration. Some of our team, as you mentioned, is even headed out to attend your November for the Regenerative Food Systems Summit. And we are doing that in our usual way. Brenna is bringing 3 of our ag partners. So we're using that opportunity again to share the work and share that platform with other people in the field doing amazing work. And so I think that really speaks to how all of us are systems level conveners. That's what we do. We bring people together. And as you prep for your summit in November, what do you hope will happen at that summit? And how can we build a more cohesive food system ecosystem, as we've talked about it, together and collaboratively in this space?
Oh, wow. Well, that second part is a big question. I'm not sure I fully have the answer to
I realized when I said that I'm more looking for goals. I don't
component.
expect you to fix the global food system in the next 9 minutes or so, but if you could, I mean, by all means.
Right.
But no, we're joking, guys. By all means, tell us more about your goals as you bring people together in November and how those goals will move us towards kind of that national ecosystem together.
Sure. So I think for us, we view Common Ground, similar to Alliance for Collective Action, as a convener of sorts, right? So we physically convene people. We use our campus to convene people and to bring people together. And we set the stage for some of these conversations. And I think the best thing that we're trying to bring forth through In Community with Food are well, I would say a couple things, actually. One, to highlight what we feel is highly innovative work and approaches being done in Hawaii. So Hawaii, because of where it sits, it's the most isolated landmass on the planet Earth. We are absolutely desperately trying to solve for the issue of food sustainability and more regenerative food systems, because we import 85 to 90% of our food, which is a major, major thing. It makes us highly vulnerable. We are not resilient right now. And so that Hawaii as a physical location or geographical location actually sets the stage really beautifully for how do we do this better. And what we've seen around the state is highly innovative approaches that integrate traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous perspectives and traditional indigenous practices into that will inform modern day practices of how we think about food systems. So things like fish ponds. Hawaiians had Native Hawaiians many, many years ago had a highly sophisticated management of nearshore fisheries. And so highlighting those practices, what does that look like in a modern age? How do you integrate data and technology into traditional practices like that for a modern day? So highlighting some of the work that is being done on a local level. And then taking that and connecting those people with people like yourselves and JP and other folks that are coming from farther away that are doing incredibly innovative global work in these same realms, in these same areas. And we feel that just simply through that act of connection, acceleration will happen. And what will happen is some of these ideas that they're already working on will become accelerated. Their impact at the local level and their impact at the global level will become accelerated. And we're also building a community. I would say selfishly, if I'm being totally honest, but I hope is one of the greatest outputs of this, and we're seeing already, is a community of people that are friends, that enjoy being together, that have fun together, that think about these ideas together, and that hopefully continue to work together far into the future, both on, like I've said, current ideas, but also that this gives birth to new ideas and new solutions. So those are really our intended outcomes for In Community with Food.
I love that so much, Jennifer. And I really like what a great place to kind of wrap us back to where we started, where you started by recognizing that Indigenous wisdom and how we learn from our past and how to be stewards, but also by convening all of us together for this collective experience and knowledge. That's how we're going to move forward together for a regenerative future. But we are in this space with so many people with amazing ideas and doing amazing work. I really think it wouldn't serve us to not open the floor for questions or comments for our panel. So if anyone has questions, comments, things they want to know about, or ways they want to connect with the panel, by all means, please raise your hand now. This is the time. And I think I will wait a moment and give people that moment. Would anyone like to ask a question? Talk about ways their work could cross-pollinate with any of our panelists. You have an opportunity right now. Or I'll just keep talking about our work and cross-pollinate ourselves with our panelists. Right there, we have a question from Dorothy Lamb. Would you like to come off mute and join us?
Yeah, I think I'm off mute.
You sure are.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. This is for Jennifer. I can't help but think about that whole state right now and the state that from the disaster in Maui. And I keep thinking, is this a chance to start something like that in a place that has to start all over in so many ways to try to, I couldn't do this. So, I mean, it's not, I mean, can you all do this? I mean, is there a way to pull people together that are trying to rebuild and yet to rebuild in a different way? Because although that particular area was known for its hospitality, I haven't been there for years, but I felt that, but the traditional hotels and places to stay, you know, if those all just go back up, I don't know. I always see crisis as a chance for opportunity, although in this field, I wouldn't know what to do.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. Thank you for just bringing forth to Maui and everything that's happened there recently. I think it's very much top of mind for so many of us out here, and just kind of feeling the collective heartbreak and weight of what happened there just a couple months ago. So like you, wherever there's tragedy, I do believe that there's an opportunity for rebuilding in a different way, for learning what we did wrong from the past and allowing that to inform how we rebuild in the future. I think for common ground, we right now, and you're not the first person to ask us that question. I imagine that we'll continue to get asked that question. I think we feel that for now, they're still very much in the triage, right? They're just quite literally trying to figure out how to get people housed and clothed and fed. And there's an economic fallout from this that's very severe and significant. And so as that dissipates over the next couple of months, as the trauma sort of is not quite so fresh, and those opportunities for conversation and perhaps most importantly, convening and healing happen, I think we'd be happy to be part of that conversation if we were called to that from the local community. So if people on Maui said, hey, look, these guys are doing interesting things, and perhaps they could inform some of the work and the planning that we're doing here, we'd be happy to do that. We've also connected with people in the Maui County office and have offered our campus just as a place away from Maui to bring everybody and quite literally get a little bit of separation from the situation there to perhaps provide some fresh perspective and objectivity and fresh air as they begin the planning process, which is so immense. And I think that there's so much pressure on the local officials, the state officials to do it differently and to do it better. And there is an opportunity there. And I think collectively, we're all hoping that that's where it will lead. But yeah, thank you so much. We'll see kind of where it all leads to, you know, but lots of aloha and love heading that direction.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Dottie, and thank you so much for that response, Jennifer. I'm really glad we got to elevate that piece in this conversation. We have time for possibly one more question if anyone is interested. Let's see. I'm not hearing the bink of the hand raising. Oh, Linda, I love that comment, actually, and I'm going to elevate that. Linda, you can come off mute if you'd like to share that comment, but I'll elevate it too for you. I know you're in the meeting, but what a great little call to action there. Linda, share that with us.
At my church, the weed patch that was the median in our north parking lot now is a vegetable garden, and this year will provide over 50 pounds of vegetables to a local food bank. And we get help from Grow Local. They provide the vegetables in late May and help us plant them. And it's a great little program. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing that, Linda. That is at the local level. That's what we want to hear. And every time I speak to a regen ag practitioner or even a soil health scientist, it always comes down to plants fix dirt. So the last thing, if you need to do one thing in your community, plant something. It's an amazing thing. It's a great thing to do. And as we wrap up with that call to action, I'm going to kick it back over to Brenna to wrap us up and talk about where we go next. Thanks, Brenna.
Thank you, Jolie. Thank you all for joining us straight through to the end. Anthony, Jacques-Philippe, Jen, and John, your work is an inspiration. It really, really is. Again, we call them pockets of hope, where there are replicable, scalable models that are already doing incredible work in their home region that we're joining together in this framework of collective action to help scale and replicate each other's work. You'll see that all of these different areas cannot be done by one organization. There's no one that can do this all. And so by being able to have a networked approach and pair the strengths of all of these amazing partners together, we really can make a difference. So thank you so much for joining us for that today. We wanted to wrap with two final messages quickly. The first one here is just reflecting back the word cloud that we put together earlier in the event. And again, you'll see collaboration is right there in the middle of everything that really inspired the group today. And the panelists you just heard from are the epitome of collaboration, joining us from Georgia, New York, California, and all the way from Hawaii. So thank you all so much for being a part of this. The next slide here that you see in front of you is a mirror. This is reflection of where our national members are. So again, we've only been recruiting for about 4 weeks now. This is in the pilot phase, seeing what works. And we have about 20 members outside of Colorado and from 9 different regions, depending on how you count Washington, D.C. So 8 states and 1 territory reflected there in front of you. And we really see this as like a member mirror. And we plan to show this every single quarterly convening. The reason why Colorado is darker is because it has the most concentration of members. And so our challenge to all of you is to help recruit members in your area, because the more membership activity that we see in a region will signal to us an invitation to come play, an invitation to come collaborate. Just like Jen said, if the local leaders in Maui are asking them to come in, it's a much easier way and a much better path to collaboration than forcing ourselves into any region that we're not welcome. So help us open the door, help us recruit members in your area, because that will help guide us where we will be engaging more in the months and years ahead. So our final call to action to you all today is, if you are already a coalition member, thank you so much. We can only do this through collective action. Recruit more in your area. Send them the link to sign up. If membership dues are a barrier, let us know. The point is not to monetize the network. The point is to grow a movement of movements. And again, we can only do that by working together. If you're not yet a member, please join. Riley just dropped the link there in the chat. So please consider joining today. And again, reach out to us. Part of the membership journey is new member orientation, where we get to know each member, identify the pockets of hope that each of you represent, and how we can work together to scale collective action. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to working with you in the months and years ahead to actualize a regenerative future. Thank you for joining us.